I've been asked to share my first near-death experience. I've had three. The first one was when I was 8.5 years old. I was deathly sick. I was taken to the hospital, and when I got there, the doctors told my stepfather and my mother that I was probably too late. I had very bad lungs. They were filling up with fluids. I had terminal, basically, kidney disease, and I had a whole bunch of other little small diseases, but all together they were draining my body, making me very ill with no energy, lost a lot of weight, wasn't doing good at all. By the time they brought me to the hospital, the doctors took me away from my parents. They strapped me on a gurney and sent me out of the main building to an isolation ward, where that first evening, the first of what turned out to be 1 year in the hospital, that first evening they strapped me down, in a chair, and then they took these big, huge needles and they jammed them into my back and started pumping fluids out of my lungs so I could breathe. They were filling up with this real heavy fluid. I mean, it had the consistency of like applesauce. It was really terrible. That's all I can remember about it, and it was a painful experience. But I kept hearing them talk to my parents before they wheeled me away, saying that it was probably too late, we waited too long, we're not sure we can do anything, don't hold out hope. So when I was being wheeled away, it didn't make me feel comfortable at all. I'm thinking, wow, man, this is worse than I even thought. So I get to the room, they do this procedure, they get done, and they don't hold my hand or ask, how are you? Nothing. It was just so done so sterilely. Just, here it is, boom, do it. It's a job. There's a bed, get in bed, kid. So that was it. So I get in bed, they turn off the lights, and there I am, all alone. And at that age, I was feeling kind of rejected. I'm away from my family. I mean, my family wasn't allowed to hang around. And, like nowadays, a kid goes to the hospital, and the parents are in the waiting room, and they're sitting in a chair next to the bed. There wasn't that back then. You went in the hospital, your parents went home. You were there all alone. There wasn't anybody. They didn't have a phone to call. Didn't have any toys, books, nothing else, no playmates. It was just, we're done with you, go to sleep. Turn off the lights, there's total darkness. In that total darkness, I was in great pain, and I could really feel it. I was still having trouble breathing, and then my kidneys and the back and the lungs, it was just solid pain. And then all of a sudden, no pain. No pain. I felt nothing. I wasn't breathing. Heart wasn't beating. I was feeling great love. A lot of people talk about this when they have a near-death experience. They say, when you have a near-death experience, there's this great feeling of love. Well, I don't think anybody can really describe it. It's like climbing back in the womb of the universe and being greeted by 1,000,000 Italian grandmothers that just want to hug you and hold you and nurture you and make you feel loved. It is so blissful, so joyful. There is no words, no vocabulary that can fully describe that love that you feel. Before I passed out or went on or left my body or whatever, when I was laying there in the pain, I was feeling abandoned, unloved. Left alone the first time, everybody's gone, and there I am on my own. And that just dissipated, it was gone. I went from that extreme to knowing that God truly loved me. It wasn't a guess, it was a knowing. Inside, outside, every cell of my being knew I was loved. I laid there and felt lighter and lighter and lighter, weight-wise, like I had no weight. And I focused downward, my consciousness. There's no head, eyes to look, but it was like I'm aware of my body down there. I'm hovering above my body. And I'm looking at the body thinking, well, I feel sorry for that poor kid. Look at that kid down there. This kid is, wow, the body is terrible shape. I'm glad I'm not him. I knew even at that age of 8.5 years old that I was not the body. I was something much greater than the body. I was consciousness. I always was, always will be, and I was a continuing process. I was not separated from the one, but I was separated from my body. And as I lay there, and being 8.5, I guess I didn't have much life history in this lifetime to go back and do a life review, but something unusual happened. I was able to get a look forward for the next 50 years forward, looking at 5 decades of my life, who I'd married, where I'd lived, where I worked, fighting in the Vietnam War, flying around in helicopters in combat, having children, seeing the John F. Kennedy presidential assassination of 1963, seeing historic events in my own life. So I knew when I was looking at that, because I realized I was looking at my older self at different levels, but it was still me. It was still my consciousness and all these images I was seeing. And I realized 2 things. One, that's your future. And number 2, if you have a future, that means you're not going to stay dead. You got to go back. And so I knew I had to go back. I also knew that I had to change my eating habits. I had health issues coming up I could see that I needed to remedy by changing my lifestyle. But my biggest takeaway that evening, as I was floating through this cloud-like environment, was the knowing that you never die, that you continue. Who you are continues. And that no matter what you've done, no matter where you go, no matter who you are loved beyond anything that you can imagine. You are loved greater than you could even describe. There is no vocabulary to tell you how much you are loved. That's the thing you come away with. It's a feeling of love. This went on for, it could have been minutes, could have been seconds, could have been hours, could have been all night. Time was totally meaningless. I had no idea what was happening. But the morning finally did come, and I found myself back in my body, painful body, suffering and dealing with pain, disease, procedures and operations coming up after that for a year. But I knew I was loved. I knew I was truly loved. And when I went home, about a year later, first few days I was home, I was with my mother, and we heard the sound. It would sound like a choir of angels singing. And we couldn't find any, television or records on or radio, or there was no sound being manufactured on the material level. Walked up and down the street wherever we went outside our house, and the volume of the singing was the same. My mother told me then, she says, that's the sound of angels. That's what we're hearing. So my life has been kind of touched and blessed by that. And a lot of beautiful things happened. And going to Vietnam, I knew I was going. I was prepared for it. And knowing what I knew prevented people from getting killed and injured. Knowing what I knew prevented atrocities from happening. It was just on that level of knowing that made my life a little easier.